Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL wire site that covers the Arizona Cardinals. And this show, episode 610, is our second preview show. A little bit later than normal, but when we normally record on Thursday, it was Halloween. So between coaching and candy and costumes, Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, joins me as we record on a Saturday morning, talking about Cardinals-Bears in Week 9. And Seth, this is kind of an important game, but at the same time, I don't know what to think of it because the Cardinals and Bears are kind of in the same boat in terms of their season. There's been some good, there's been some not so good. I have a prediction, but I don't have a good feel for what this game's going to be.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see the Bears come out of last week. Obviously, the Hail Mary ending, and you know that took them from being potentially 5-2 to 4-3. And while it's one game, it looks a lot different on paper, right? Like you're 4-3 and in last place in the NFC North as opposed to 5-2 and tied for third in the NFC North, which looks like the best division in football this year. Every team above 500. Obviously, the Detroit Lions look like the class of the NFC. The Green Bay Packers have been playing extremely well. The Minnesota Vikings are coming back to earth slightly, and then you have the Chicago Bears, right? And as you said, they're kind of an interesting team to figure out because you have a team that is decent defensively. I wouldn't say great outside of their scoring defense. You have a team that is mostly bad, but has incredibly exciting moments offensively. And the reality becomes that you end up watching these games with and you do see that this team has something, but kind of like the Cardinals, the difference being that it's not talent on one side of the ball. It just seems to be missing something to put it all together in a consistent manner.
Yeah, it's interesting how their splits go this season. They're 4-3, but they're undefeated at home, 4-0. They are winless on the road at 0-3.
And last week was a bad one, man.
Yeah. They haven't allowed more than 21 points in any game this year. But they also, like, in their at home, they haven't scored fewer than 24 points. On the road, they haven't scored more than 16. So they're fourth in scoring defense. Again, not allowing 21 points or more than 21 in any game. Their pass defense is pretty solid. Their run defense is okay, but I look at the yards per carry allowed at 4.7. That's well below average. And then the other part is that they take the ball away. They have multiple takeaways in 5 of their 7 games. They have a total of 15 takeaways in 7 games. And last week was the first time that they did not get a takeaway.
You mentioned
they're great in the red zone. Red zone and third down. They're fantastic.
Which, the Cardinals are terrible against third downs and pretty good in the red zone, right? So it's an interesting one, Jess, because the other thing you look at is you mentioned the turnovers, right? In their 3 losses, they lost the turnover battle. In the loss to the Houston Texans, they turned the ball over twice. only caused one turnover. In the loss to the Indianapolis Colts, which, week to week, you don't know if that's a good or bad loss, right?
The Colts are weird. I honestly, Joe Flacco makes that team better. As sad as that is for the team moving forward, when your ancient backup, Joe Flacco, gives your team a better chance than your young franchise quarterback who doesn't look very franchise. Yeah. But yeah, we can't tell about the Colts this year. They are an enigma for sure. And it's kind of worse than the Cardinals, because the Cardinals, you're like, oh, they're bad. Oh, wait, they're not bad. And then the Colts, you're like, are they good? Or they're like, oh, they're good. Oh, they're not good. This is like completely different things. Besides that, don't continue. We're not talking.
But yeah. So I mean, in that game, they turned the ball over 3 times and they forced 2 turnovers. And so it's interesting because you mentioned it outside of the first 2 games where the offense was really still finding its footing, if we're being completely honest, right? They've almost outgained their opponents in every game. I mean, 395 to 306 against the Colts, 424 to 292 against the Panthers, but we typically don't count that. Let's be honest.
No. Panthers.
The London game before their bye week, they had 373 yards to 278 yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But then last week happened, and last week was a giant step back, if we're being completely honest. And you can't blame anything. You can't blame weather condition, anything like that, because you had a team in Washington who threw for 313 yards and ran for 168 yards. They put up 481 total yards of offense, which is an astronomical number, the most the Bears defense has given up all year. The previous high to that was 322 they'd given up. So like this was a terrible defensive game from the Bears, despite only allowing 18 points and a miracle needing to happen for the Commander Skins to win, right? So on the flip side, the Bears only threw for 105 yards. That's their 4th game this year under 150 yards passing, Jess. Their run game over the last 4 weeks has really found its footing. 202 rushing yards in the game. And it seemed like it was going to be one of those games where they just controlled the ball, played great defense for the most part, and grinded out a win. But the reality became in that second half, right, that even though Austin Seibert, the Commanders kicker, kicked 4 field goals, they went for 2. They were up by 3, so they could have tied it with a field goal, but they couldn't get them in range. And so it was really interesting because the way that game unfolded and played out was basically the blueprint of an ugly win, right? Like don't do much on offense, do enough on defense to win a game, especially holding them out of the red zone, and then a miracle happens, and it changes everything. Because I don't know if you saw the post on X by Bill Barnwell, but this matchup is a real juxtaposition. The Bears came into this game, their first 7 games, having played the easiest schedule so far. The Cardinals played the toughest schedule so far. And then the rest of your season, the Bears play the toughest schedule. Their only easy game, quote unquote, would be the New England Patriots.
Yes, and the Cardinals next week. And then goes Packers, Vikings, Lions, 49ers, Vikings, Lions, Seahawks, Packers. Dang. Holy cow.
Meanwhile, the Cardinals have the 4th easiest schedule coming out of there. We broke that down on Tuesday. Really, that section of the Seattle, Minnesota, Seattle, sandwich is really all that's left until the end of the season, and we won't know, what San Francisco or LA is until it's too late, basically, because of injuries and inconsistency for both teams. I mean, you saw Puka Nacua is probably out again this week. I mean, he just showed up to beat the tar out of the Minnesota Vikings, put up a ton of yards, and then it goes back into hiding for who knows how long.
Well, that was his thing at BYU too. He was so good, but was also a little injury prone when he was at BYU too. So it's finally showing up, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the Rams and unfortunate for fans of Nacua who like watching him play, which in my household and a lot of my friends and family are big Nacua fans. But I mean, it means for an interesting NFC West where, as opposed to the NFC North, where everybody has a winning record, in the NFC West where no one has a winning record, and the Cardinals are in first place. That tells you about the NFC West this year. There is undeniable talent on this Bears team.
On both sides of the ball, too, Jess. They're
yes.
incredible. And, a lot of fans, and we can mention this because we won't be on the air before the trade deadline breaks. The rumors are the Cardinals are actively pursuing a pass rusher. I'm always skeptical about rumors. Not saying that they're not, right? But this is, I feel like, a different situation than what we saw last year, where the Bears, who were not very good at the moment, went and traded for Montez Sweat. The difference being that the Bears, sitting at 2-6 at the trade deadline, had the first overall pick, or were likely to have the first overall pick in the draft. And then another, top 10 pick with their own. And so it was one of those situations where they sat there and they said, they were saying, hey, we're going to get 3 franchise players in the draft. And then they ended up winning, 5 of their final 8 games.
Sweat completely changed that defense.
He did. And so for the Cardinals, as much as we would like to see a big move made, and I still think there is a chance.
The one move that would do that, wouldn't that be like a Max Crosby? I don't know if there is another player that they could get.
Yeah, at that level, right? Like
that would be that impactful immediately and beyond. Like the guys like Azeez Ojulari, he's solid. He's better than anything the Cardinals have. Arden Key, better than anything the Cardinals have. But if you're talking like, season changing, Crosby's that guy.
Right. I mean, obviously the faux Myles Garrett thing too, but yeah, I mean,
why in the no, that's not happening.
Well, and think about Sweat last year, right? He led 2 teams in sacks. Like
yes.
the Cardinals sack leader, RIP Dennis Gardeck's knee, but like that's their sack leader this year. I mean, Ben Stille and Dante Stills are working towards it, but they're not there yet. And they're not going to, but let's say they trade Dante Stills. He's not going to go lead any other team in sacks. So that there's no comparison there, as you're mentioning. But Azeez or Arden Key, or heck, just go get both of them. Right? Like just go get both of them, throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. But yeah, I mean, so that was a different thing, because the Bears were going, hey, if we set ourselves up, we know we're going to have the first overall pick. We know we're going to have, a top 10 pick. And they almost played themselves out of a top 10 pick, if we're being honest. We can get this 27-year-old playmaker that's on a team that's signed, that we can really kind of own for the next 3 or 4 years during his prime, and set ourselves up where, as his window is closing as being an elite pass rusher, our window is there to compete for an NFC North championship. Now, So that's what they've done, and it really, like you said, set them up for this year where their defense is playing very well. And it was one of my questions, is that what, like, I talked with Bill Zimmerman of Windy City Gridiron, and they have done a great job against the pass. Outside of last week, they've done a great job. And Bill even mentioned, and you never want to take away anything. And it's one of my big pet peeves of like, oh, well, just, these 2 plays accounted for, 100 yards or whatever. It's like, well, but those 2 plays counted. So,
yes.
But he did mention, he's like, Jaden Daniels threw for 326 yards, but 120 came on 2 plays that Tyreek Stevens screwed up. And we've seen the videos floating around of the last play, obviously. And then you have the other thing. So you look at it from that perspective, and you have a really good defense. Now, they do have some issues. Kyler Gordon has been dealing with a hamstring injury. He may not play again. Jaquan Brisker,
he's out.
He is at the point where it might be lights out. Like, I'm not trying to be crass or anything. He had his 3rd concussion in 3 seasons. He has not played since September, and those are their 2 like bona fide stars in the secondary. I mean, and they're both ballers, like just straight up playmakers. Jalen Johnson obviously is the number 1 guy, but like Brisker and Kyler were the young guns coming in and really playing well. So, those injuries and that unknown is a problem. But on the flip side is, and you mentioned it to start with, they are Charmin soft up the middle against the run. You mentioned it, 14th in yards overall, but 23rd in yards per attempt. And Bill mentioned it in the write-up, stopping the run. TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, 2 names we know really well. They're not interior run guys. They're not guys that are good against the run, stopping the run. They don't have that.
The volume tackle guys, but
right. They don't have that Mac Wilson type that has brought a different physicality to the team that we haven't seen. And then you look at their defensive line. Gervin Dexter has become a freak, and we both really liked him coming out of Florida in 2023, but we thought he was going to be like a 3rd rounder, and we both, while we were huge fans, we were a little skeptical of him going in the mid-2nd round, and it's obviously been a boon for them. But outside of Dexter, their defensive line is not. They're not built to stop the run consistently. I mean, they've got Darrell Taylor, who used to be with the Seahawks. He's a pass rushing type. Andrew Billings, he's been inconsistent at best, I guess is the best way to put it. They've got these guys that have been decent, but decent against the pass.
Yeah,
like
wouldn't it be more like that the way they built this team was because of their offensive weapons, that they wouldn't need to be as strong against the run, that they would be playing from ahead? Do you think that's how they kind of anticipated the design? Because teams like you can't generally build for both, right? you have to be adequate against the pass and great against the run, or adequate against the run and great against the pass defensively. It's almost how you have to go.
Yeah, my issue with that, and you're 100% correct, Jess, but my issue with that is you have to look at your division. And you have Detroit as the top dog, and you say
they do both so well. That's
no, and you're right, but I mean, there's still they're very I don't mean this in a negative way, so I don't want anybody to think it is, but like they're built similarly to the Cardinals, right? Like now they're much better than the Arizona Cardinals, so I don't want that to get lost in the shuffle here. But having David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs allows them to have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and those guys as receivers. And while Amon-Ra St. Brown is a 1,000% alpha, zero question about his ability, it's not like they have guys it's not like they're the Miami Dolphins. It's not like they're the New York Jets now, right? Like it's not like they've got talent everywhere like those teams. They've got good players. They've got an elite guy in Amon-Ra St. Brown, but for the most part, that offensive line is a bunch of ass kickers that want to get downhill and run the ball. And so when you build a team that says, okay, we're gonna be able to play with these guys in the passing game, ideally. I mean, obviously that didn't work out great last week, but we can't stop the run consistently. You go, well, what are you doing? Look at who's at the top of your division, and that's why I think the way the Cardinals are doing it, where they're just like, we don't have any talent on the defense side of the ball. It is what it is. Like, we'll figure it out as we get closer on one side of the ball. Like,
oh my gosh,
we
don't have talent.
So I mean, but you look at, like, I know it's funny and it's funny and you laugh so you don't cry type stuff, but like think about it, Jess. Like they're base. I don't want to say they've punted the defensive side of the ball because they've added talent, but they've basically gone, okay, we were so far away on offense and defense that we put most of our efforts into one side of the ball for 2 years. And now that we're really close on one side of the ball, it's still not there. We can obviously see that where the consistency is not there yet, but it's closer. I mean, they're almost into the top half of scoring offenses. They're top 10 running the ball. They're getting closer as a passing team. Like their yards, they're top 12. They're getting there. And so you're like, okay, we probably are one piece away on offense. And then you can start focusing. The Bears try to like do it at the same time, right? They're like, okay. And so, but the one thing they missed was that defensive line and the ability to bring it. I mean, the weird thing to me is that, and I'm a huge Tremaine Edmonds fan. I'm a huge fan of TJ Edwards. I think they're both very, very good football players. It never made sense to have both. They're very similar in what they do extremely well. So it felt like that was like, oh, well, if we have one, two's better, right? Where it's like
as opposed to being complementary.
Right. And it kind of makes me think of like if the Cardinals went out and got another Kaiser White. It's like Kaiser White's really good, so two must be better. It's like, no, because then all of a sudden you lack not the physicality, but the durability to stand up in the middle consistently. So you go get a Mac Wilson, who is kind of a bigger thudder, still, again, my favorite play this year is him just mauling Penei Sewell on that pull block.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
Where it like that's not Kaiser White's game. That's Mac Wilson's game. Like you get guys like you said that play complementary football together, and it seemed like for them they were like, hey, these guys, and I get it. You got Sam Laporta, you got TJ Hawkinson if he ever gets healthy again. You've got this talent, and then obviously the Packers, for whatever reason, every year have one tight end that goes for like 700 yards, but it's never the same guy, and then they bring in somebody different, right? So it's like, hey, now we got two guys in Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds that can cover tight ends, so we're set. And it's like, oh crap, we can't stop the run. And so that's what it comes down to. So can the Cardinals, take advantage of what is the obvious weakness? But it's going to be great matchups. I mean, we got Jalen Johnson over there. I
Taylor
wish
Johnson, Marvin Harrison. Yes.
I do wish we would see Gordon and Brisker, but obviously health is way, way more important at this point. So you have to kind of deal with it. But and so those will be the guys that really set this tone on defense. And then, offensively, Jess, they're loaded for bear. It just seems like there's
the offensive line is the problem.
Well, there's the offensive line, and I agree 100% with that. But let's be honest, it's tough to, even in a situation such as this, it's still really hard to be a rookie quarterback.
Yes.
Like, it's extremely hard. And so when you have rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams trying to get guys the ball consistently, and one of the guys we can mention who's still doing yeoman's work at getting first downs on nearly every catch he has, but it's just he's not the same guy anymore as Keenan Allen, right? 32 years old. As gentlemen of a certain age that you and I are, that have been 32, we remember
32 is such a long time.
But we also remember that your body does start to change right at that age, where like you could get away with eating or not exercising a certain way, and then it doesn't. And this is a long-winded way of me not saying Keenan Allen's fat, but man, he's put on a lot of weight, right? So, and he's only played 5 games this year.
Right. And the knock on him has always been
health.
Injuries. There's always just been health. But the skill players, they are loaded. But and part of it's being a rookie quarterback. Caleb Williams has been sacked 23 times this season. That's a lot. He's been, which is 9%, over 9%, almost 10% of his dropbacks have resulted in sacks. He's had good, he's had bad. Interesting is that how people are worried about Marvin Harrison. And then we look at Rome Odunze's numbers at 20 catches for 287 yards, but he's not nearly as good. But here's the thing. Rome hasn't had to be the guy. And so his 20 and 287 are fine. That's not a disappointing thing at all, because they've got DJ Moore and they've got Cole Kmet and they got Keenan Allen. And so, yeah, this is a team that has the potential to be great offensively, and they've shown flashes of that against bad teams, like the Packers and the Panthers and the Jaguars. But the rest, the offense has been disjointed. But yeah, I think it comes down to the rookie play. I will say this: Caleb Williams every week seems to be looking a little bit better. I expected him, but
last week was bad.
When they were projecting, what was it? Was it 8.5 or 9.5 wins? I said, no, he's not CJ Stroud. He's not Andrew Luck. And apparently that's Jaden Daniels this year. But I thought that Williams would be a guy that wouldn't make mistakes. He would, and we saw that early. He looked bad early. But yeah, so offensively, they have issues on the offensive line. They run the ball well. They have an inconsistent pass game defensively. They can get after the quarterback. They have good talent at the edge. They have good talent in coverage. But also offensively, schematically, they have their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. The Cardinals are used to that. They faced him when he was there in Seattle. So last year, they will know how to. This is between the 2 games they had last year and the film they have this year on Chicago. This is a team that knows what to do, and the Cardinals were that close from beating Seattle in Week 8. They should have, and Matt Prater knew the assignment, and we got Marv and all that stuff. The rest is history. But yeah, so this is a team that, kind of like a Cardinals. They're getting there, but there's still some there's still some questions. So let's talk about the matchup next. Coming up next on the Res Here podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on and discuss the actual matchup, the keys to how the Cardinals can get a win and what we're looking for. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast. Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's talk Cardinals-Bears matchup. There are, interestingly enough, some interesting, intriguing matchups. And if there's one thing I've if I have write it down and kind of circle this matchup, is how the edge play against what's going to be a third string left tackle. Their top two left tackles are out. It looks like that they're going to activate Larry Borum from IR to play left tackle. And remember the last time the Cardinals played backup to left tackle? That was against the Rams when they had their best performance at the pass rush. Zaven Collins dominated that game. So I kind of got my eyes set. How does Zaven do? And Jesse Luketa and Julian Okwara, how do they do against that left side of that Bears offensive line that is barely holding things together?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, man. This is going to be an interesting one. Kieran Amagadaji. I know he's from Yale. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He stepped in for Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones hasn't had a bad season as the starting left tackle, but he got hurt, as you said, and the Yale rookie steps in and he immediately goes down. This is so Cardinals-like, right? Like, hey, Jonah Williams is hurt. Okay, you're in. Kelvin Beachum. Okay, Kelvin.
He
Beachum
gets hurt.
Okay,
Jackson Barton plays. He gets hurt.
Yeah. So Arizona Cardinals fans, it's not just us. It happens all over the place. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge win for the Cardinals in that sense, because I mean, while the Bears offensive line has struggled, at times and gives up, they have some talent overall. I mean, you look at it, they've got a couple average guys in Matt Pryor and Coleman Shelton on the interior. Tevin Jenkins has looked really good. And then Braxton Jones seemed to be developing into a decent player. Which, we always talk about, right? Like when you get a guy like Braxton Jones, who I believe is only in his second or third year, that you got in like the fifth round, and he develops into a quality, not necessarily a standout, but a quality left tackle. You're like, all right, that makes life a lot easier for everybody else. But now all of a sudden it's like they're on their third string left tackle. Like I said, Coleman Shelton and Matt Pryor aren't bad, but they look a lot different when the starting left tackle's not in, right? Because all of a sudden that shine wears off, and now all of a sudden your errors and flaws start to come into play. And as we said, they haven't run the ball well consistently. DeAndre Swift has been good, not great. And the reality is that they've had guys in the sense of like Caleb Williams is their second leading rusher on the season.
Roshan Johnson, all 100% short yardage is what they use him for.
And Khalil Herbert, who was decent,
disappeared.
Yeah,
disappeared.
He's got 8 carries on the season, man. Like that's a wild statistic, because you look at what he did his second year and last year. I mean, this was a guy that was averaging near 5 yards a carry, and now all of a sudden he can't get on the field. But it is, Matt Eberflus is an interesting character, man. And reality wise, you mentioned the Colts situation. Shane Steichen kind of coaching for his job in Indy. Matt Eberflus is doing the same thing. If they make the playoffs, it's really hard to move on from Matt Eberflus, right? So outside of
Nagy all over again, they
keep
putting themselves. Their coaches keep putting themselves in the same situation. I thought for sure that Eberflus would be gone because they're going to, bring in the new coach, bring in the new quarterback, but like the way they played defense down the stretch, Interesting. Side note, should have talked about that. Remember, I don't know how much of Hard Knocks you watched. Remember how great Austin Booker looked in the preseason?
Yeah.
And he's played a little bit. He's had a sack through half the season, 3 hits, 3 tackles for loss. I guess he's doing a little bit, but it's interesting how, 7th round picks, become 7th round picks as opposed to, hey, he's the next great thing. But yeah, I think the Cardinals have to lean on the run game on Sunday.
Absolutely.
This is the Drew Petzing game. That we finally saw the pass game. We're like, the pass game came open up, but against the Bears, you got to lean into the run game. And I still think they need to produce in the pass game. But I want to see. Isn't it kind of the thing? So we're kind of looking at if you can get 250 yards between Connor, McBride, and Harrison, right? And if you can get that, I think you're probably going to win that game. But it's going to start with Connor in this game because the Cardinals average over 5 yards a carry, and the Bears give up 4.7, and so they're not world beaters. So if you avoid the penalties and you can stay on schedule, you've got to figure out how to do things in the red zone because. Interestingly enough, I wrote an article earlier this week about the third down play on both teams. It's got a strength on strength and a weakness on weakness. The Bears offensively are atrocious on third down, but the Cardinals are dead last in third down defenses. They give up first downs 52% of the time, and that wasn't helped by the 11 for 15 in Miami last week. But the Cardinals are number 8 in third down offense at almost 42%. And the Bears are great on third down defense. And so you've got this interesting juxtaposition of strength on strength and weakness versus weakness. If the Cardinals can run the ball on first and second down, they avoid the third and long, they're going to be in good shape. But yeah, I think, they got to play well on third down. They've got to run the ball. And they've got to limit the turnovers because the Bears take the ball away at a high rate. The Cardinals, while the last week was the first week they didn't have a turnover, their turnover rate is a little more than 1 a game, and so that's reasonable.
Yeah, and you look at it, they haven't been able to get DJ Moore going consistently. I mean, DJ Moore has been a workhorse in the NFL. He's got 4 1,000-yard seasons. His first year in Chicago last year, he had over 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. This year, he's on pace for far, far less. I mean, he barely has 340 yards receiving this year. He has 1 100-yard game. And so that's the thing is, while you want to control the game and the clock because you still have to respect that DJ Moore is the guy that put up 1,300 yards last year, right? Like that he's a guy that can produce 5 for 105 and 2 touchdowns at any point, like he did against Carolina 3 weeks ago. I guess now it was a month ago. Geez, 4 weeks ago. But it's been so inconsistent. And then you have you have Cole Kmet, and again, Kmet was mentioned along the same lines as Trey McBride, right? I mean, coming off back-to-back years with over 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then this year, he's on pace for right around the same, but it's been so hit and miss. I mean, he's got games where he's got 4 yards, 27 yards, 34 yards, and 14 yards. But then he's got those big games where he's got 97 yards and a touchdown, 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's just there's clearly, a rookie quarterback is running things, and that's not a shot at Caleb Williams. It's just the reality of a rookie quarterback. And then you've got, you mentioned Rome Odunze. It's just, I mean, he's had the one big game, 6 catches for 112 yards. Outside of that, his high on the season was last week, 3 catches, 41 yards. That's just, he's been kind of mundane. And that's the concern for me more than anything, Jess, is that it feels like they're ripe for an explosive offensive day, right? Like it just feels like
that could happen. That could happen. And the Cardinals defense is bad. Like really.
Well, and you've got a rookie quarterback that's thrown for over 300 yards in 2 games. In those games, he's got 667 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like those games were otherworldly. I mean, those are great games for a rookie. But he also, as I mentioned earlier, has 4 games under 175 yards passing. Like really, I mean, he's got 2 games under 135 yards passing. Like that's just an absurd bad work. And you shrugged off week 1, right? 14 for 29, 93 yards. But then he followed it up last week, 10 of 24 for 131 yards. So how does he respond? Like you said, that's against, well, Tennessee's a bad defense, so I don't want to give them too much credit. But that, you know, that was his first.
Not great either.
Yeah, and so it's like, how does he follow up? The Cardinals' matchup advantages have to be the inconsistency of the Bears and taking advantage of when they're not. And it's funny because when I answered the question, you know, for Windy City Gridiron, it's always the same thing. You know, what would you do if you were the you know, Matt Eberflus or Shane Waldron to scheme against the Cardinals? And you go, I mean, I don't know. You don't really have to do a whole lot of scheming. Like they're not
run the ball.
Right. They're not very good. And then it was so funny though. I said, as long as you can, you know, my last statement was like, you need to avoid mistakes and self-inflicted wounds. And one of their fans commented and said, and they were like, oh, well, then that's not going to happen. Like, basically it was like, oh, well, if
both teams are mistaken. Well, and that's the thing, like with the Cardinals, like this stat that the Bears haven't allowed more than 21 points this season. That's crazy. But I'm going to tell you my prediction. I predict the Cardinals are going to score more than 21 points because as inconsistent as the Cardinals have been offensively, wouldn't you say that their problems offensively have not been caused by other teams? They've been caused by themselves. And so when they are not making their mistakes, they can score on pretty much anyone, I believe, because their problems have not been a team shutting them down. It has been drops. It's been errant throws. It's been penalties. And that's, but defensively, it's different. Defensively, the Cardinals at best are scrappy and need complete. And yeah, they have to play mistake-free. They have to play perfectly disciplined within the scheme so that, and then make tackles so that they don't lose the big plays, because they've been okay. Like receivers haven't gone off against them, but quarterbacks have had big numbers. If they can, so they just have to. The Cardinals, I like to call them a defense that is a survival defense that makes just enough plays if they're going to win games, right? So they scrap around. They don't get, like, they've had the 2 games they've gotten their doors blown out. But if they stay scrappy, they get one key third down stop, and then the offense can do something.
Well, and you mentioned it. I mean, they don't. Their defense, the Bears' defense has been good this year, but they're not big play. They're opportunistic. I mean, they're right in the middle of the pack in terms of sacks. They have 20 on the season. That's the same as the Lions, the Niners, the Bills, and the Eagles. So like, it's not like they're getting a ton of sacks. Their turnovers, you know, they've got their top 10. They have 7 interceptions. It's just one of those situations where you look at it. The biggest thing is that they don't allow passing touchdowns, right? Like, they've only given up 5 passing touchdowns all year, but guess who was in front of them last week? The Miami Dolphins, right? Like the Miami Dolphins had only given up 3 passing touchdowns all season. Kyler put up
307 yards, 2 touchdowns against the number 1 pass defense. But so as you mentioned, you don't want to go in being belligerent, right? Like, they're clearly better off being able to run the football consistently.
That being said, they shouldn't fear this Chicago Bears pass defense because they've shown that they can compete against good passing defenses and win a game. So it's one of those situations.
Yeah, and in the individual matchups to watch there, and the Cardinals haven't allowed a sack in the last 3 games. They've only allowed one quarterback. Kyler's only been hit once in each of the last 3 games, and that's part offensive line, and that's a lot of Kyler. Kind of the matchup on the offensive line to watch are the 2 best pass rushers. That's Gervon Dexter and Montez Sweat, who are going to line up primarily against Tristan Colon and Isaiah Adams on the interior, and then against Kelvin Beachum at right tackle. So, if Kyler is still in the same groove in terms of his escapability, it'll be interesting to see, because the Cardinals do benefit from his off-schedule plays. Like, he's making plays on schedule, but the biggest plays come off schedule. Like that touchdown to Michael Wilson. Like, you go back to early in the season, the touchdown to Elijah Higgins, the way he's able to maneuver and just make plays happen. And what's nice is that the Cardinals pass catchers, they're doing so much better of playing when things go off schedule. When the scramble drill goes, they're so much better, because remember the last couple of years you were like, and then the receivers, he'd get away, but he couldn't get the ball to anyone because no one was open.
Yeah, it seems like they're learning and becoming more comfortable with it, right?
Yeah. Coming up next on the Rise of Seer podcast, Special of Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on to our picks, prediction, props, and more. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise of Seer podcast, Special of Cardinals Talk on the Web. Time to make our picks and predictions for this game and look at the betting side of that, props that we can make. Honestly, I don't have a good feeling, but I've got this going in. Like, I keep thinking, like, well, Alyssa Barbieri, when I had her on the other show, when I said, 23-20, and she's like, you think they're going to score? I'm like, I think they can. But the Bears also haven't scored more than 16 on the road. I think they will. I've got the Cardinals winning this game 23-20. It might actually be another game-winning field goal by Chad Ryland in the last couple of minutes, because dude has been clutch, and also Kyler. So if they get the ball with time left in the fourth quarter, I trust Kyler to make plays, and I trust Ryland to make the kick. So while part of me says, this could be 16-13, 19-17, I think the Cardinals are going to do okay offensively, and the Bears will do a little bit better than they have on the road, so they'll score a couple of touchdowns. But ultimately, Kyler will come through, and the kicker will come through. And so I'm saying 23-20 Cardinals. James Conner has a solid game. Marvin McBride don't have big games, but we'll say McBride gets his first touchdown of the year.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Bears win, because I'm still not buying the Cardinals in any type of form.
That's true.
Consistency.
I guess that's true. Could they win 3 games in a row? I mean, They haven't won. That hasn't happened since 2021. But yeah, I guess if we're scripting the season, it makes more sense for the Cardinals to lose this game and beat the Jets next week than it does to win this week and lose to the Jets next week, or even to win 4 straight and go 6-4, because that'd be crazy talk, right?
Yeah, so I've got it going 2017 Bears, and kind of following the script that you mentioned of 2 teams that haven't put together consistency on either side of the ball, on the road or in, at home. So, and it's not that I don't think that this team can win. It has nothing to do with that. I'm taking the principled approach of like, hey, show me something consistently, like consistently win games before I'm like back on this is a team that's going to do this and this, and because like it just hasn't been consistent enough for me.
And in terms of that, like if you like Seth's game prediction, then you should like the alternate total, because it's set, what is it, 44.5, 43.5? What is it right now? 44.5, which seems high. But but you can take an alternate total, say 40.5 at plus 145, or 40, 155, 39.5 plus 165. And so, like, if you like what Seth's saying at 2017, so you get under 40, you can make a little bit of money on the alternate total in this game.
Yeah, and you look at it, and this game, scoring wise, as you mentioned, it's going to be interesting. I'm not a big fan of like exact points and things like that, but the ones to look at, the total touchdowns scored, under 4.5. That's an interesting one. It's plus 130. That means both teams score 2 touchdowns, but then they kick 3 field goals combined. That's what I have that at. So that's something to look at. What's interesting is that both teams are minus under 2.5, or so under 2.5 is minus money. So it's like better money to take the over. So because they don't see it either, right? Like they're like, no, I don't believe you. So
there honestly, there aren't great, like the kicking props. Like we hit the kicking props. No plus odds on kicking props this week, which is a bummer. But
so the interesting one to me is, again, and we're not overly enthused about the offensive chances here, right? But both Kyler and Caleb are plus 150 or higher to throw for 2 touchdown passes.
Wow, that's the FanDuel gives you better odds. It's plus 135 for Caleb and plus 145 on BetMGM right now. Yeah. So FanDuel is the way to go for those bets.
So it's plus 150 for Caleb, plus 162 for Kyler. If you're feeling like they can get the ball in the red zone and find those dynamic receivers on both sides of the ball, those are good odds to have. I don't like either over, even though 218 is not very much for Kyler. I don't like the over on that, just because, like you said, it's such a interesting game to see both sides of it.
Well, like, you're not getting any significant plus odds on anything. Over half an interception for either one, minus odds. It's there's nothing fantastic. And like the rushing props, they're fairly high because they have the total for James Conner at BetMGM at 70.5, and then 75 plus is only minus 105. DeAndre Swift is 65.5 with plus 110 at minus 115, and then plus 110 for 75 plus. And like, you go up to 100 plus for both of those, and they're massive numbers, plus 275 for Conner and plus 310 for DeAndre Swift. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't love the 100 plus for either, right? And so I'm like, I don't know. Like, there is nothing that's screaming for me, hey, there's some okay ones. Oh, here's one. Cole Kmet over 3.5 catches plus 120.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like Kmet's alt receptions. I didn't look at what it is. It is 3.5 here too, plus 136 on FanDuel. Okay. So better price there. Yeah, it's so funny. That's the other one I was going to tell you. So again, be careful, because it's very minute, so it's not going to change anything. But Kmet's over under is 3.5, and it's plus 136. But if you go to his alt receptions, his 4+ is plus 130. Again, it's incredibly minute. But like, if you're going to take the same number, at least get that extra little juice in there, right, to make some money. The other one I like, because I've been messing around with these on my own time, because I don't like to start something and not like kind of see how it goes first. But look at Marvin Harrison Jr.'s first quarter alt receiving yards. So they've they've made it a priority, it seems, right, to get out and get him involved early in the game. And 10 plus is minus 102, but 15 plus yards in the first quarter is plus 148.
Ooh, that's nice.
Yeah, so I've been playing around with that every week, just throwing a couple bucks here and there on it. And then the one I would do this week is if you want to go plus 10 for Harrison and plus 10 for DJ Moore, it actually ends up being a nice little combo of plus 282. I think it's going to be a priority for both teams to get them involved early, and try to get this game going. So those are the only things I feel really strongly about. Like I said, I might throw a little bit on the over 1.5 for each quarterback, just to see if it hits, but because the juice is so good. But there's not anything I'm overly passionate about this week like I have been in the past. I mean, if you listen to this show, Raheem Mostert 2+ touchdowns plus 3,600. I hope you got it. I didn't take it. I should have. I completely spaced it because it was an early game and I just completely forgot it. I did take Kyler over 1.5 passing touchdowns last week, so that was a good thing. But if I would have, I'd text Jess when he scored his second touchdown.
Yes, he did.
I was so mad at myself. I was like, I cannot believe, because that's the thing. I mean, it's such a silly thing, but a $5 to $10 bet, you're talking $360, and a nice week of groceries, right?
Yeah. On the defensive side, I missed it by a tackle. Kaiser, but you've got some good odds on this. It's over 7.5 combined tackles and assists for Kaiser White is plus 115. It was basically the same thing last week, and he had 7. But in 5 of the 8 games, I believe, this season, he has hit 8 or more tackles. And knowing the type of offense that the Bears have, this is right for a productive Kaiser White game, don't you think?
Yeah, it should be, and they're going to have to establish the run and try to go off that. Oh, I did want to mention one other prop I really liked. I completely spaced it. Caleb Williams over 24.5 rushing yards. I think that he's going to have to use his feet a little bit to get things going. And if you're feeling really froggy, his 40 plus is plus 265. Again, second leading rusher on this team. The Cardinals don't do a good job of containing quarterbacks, even when they're getting pressure, right? They tend to lose contain consistently. I think that's one that you could see a decent day at the office for Caleb Williams running the football.
As for just basic stuff, I will take the over on James Conner's rushing total 70.5. I would take the over as well on DeAndre Swift at 65.5. But I normally like laddering those. I don't love the ladders this week.
I was gonna say, if you have both apps and you're only gonna take one, make sure you go to FanDuel for James Connors and go to BetMGM for DeAndre Swift. I know it's a pain in the neck, but Connors right now is 68.5. So you get you get a 2-yard buffer that you don't get. But on the flip side, Swift's is 67.5 on FanDuel. So you're getting a 2-yard buffer on BetMGM. Again, it's minute. You might say, who cares? But like, if James Conner ends up with 69 yards rushing, you're going to care.
Yes. And the alternate rush, like Swift, I wouldn't mind laddering to 75 plus because you get plus 110 odds on 75 plus for him. On BetMGM, you only get the 25s. FanDuel, you can do it by 10s, can't you? But on BetMGM, you get 25 plus, 50 plus. It's by 25 yards. So Swift at 75 plus as plus 110. That's a good one. I do kind of like if you want it, like this is the one that's just good to throw a couple of bucks down because we've seen the big games. You can take Kyler 50 plus rushing yards at plus 210. That's always worth it. That's always a scary one because he does the kneel downs, but
right. Hopefully he's at about 60 when the kneel downs start.
Yes. And the way things go at the end of the games, the way they play, they're usually have to kick a field goal to win, so they don't kneel it down. But that is the one worry there, because he also sometimes will do like a 2-yard loss kneel down as well, which will drive the bettors crazy.
Always, right?
All right, man. We'll wrap up this edition of the show. We'll get this published so that you can listen to it before the Sunday show. We'll be back next week as we will talk about what they have coming up against the New York Jets. Hopefully I can get a Jets guest, but if anything else, Seth and I will be back for at least 2 shows next week, and hopefully I can have a third. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Right.